A lot of people watch with great interest Dr. Sanjay Gupta over at CNN appearing on the Joe Rogan podcast. Both Krystal and I listened to the entire thing. I recommend that you all go do so as well. Joe actually presses Sanjay Gupta hard on the case for vaccination. Sanjay Gupta does a good job of laying out what I would say the most reasonable pro-vaccine case there is. Joe does a good job of representing the other side. Regardless, we need to see a lot more of that in our media, people who are actually engaging with one another. It was a very respectful conversation. There was one part, though, that we had to pull out. We were going to wait until Friday in order to post this, but because there's so much interest, and I think we'll go ahead and post it today on Thursday for those of you who are watching. Joe is grilling Sanjay Gupta on, remember CNN's decision in order to call ivermectin horse dewormer, specifically in reference to Rogan, after he got sick. And Joe really grills him and gets Sanjay Gupta to admit that CNN made a mistake and should not have said what they said. One of the rarest things you're ever going to see. Let's take a listen.
By the way, I'm glad you're better. I'm glad it only lasted a day.
You're probably the only one at CNN that's glad.
No. We're not.
The rest of them are all lying about me taking horse medication. And we should talk about that.
That bothered you.
It should bother you too. They're lying at your network about people taking human drugs versus drugs for veterinary.
Calling it a horse dewormer is not a flattering thing. I get that.
It's a lie. It's a lie on a news network, and it's a lie that's a willing. That's a lie that they're conscious of. It's not a mistake.
Yeah.
They're unfavorably framing it as veterinary medicine.
Well, the FDA put this thing out. You saw that. Did you see that thing that the FDA put out?
What did the FDA put out?
It was a tweet, and it was snarky. I admit it. They said, "You are not a horse. You are not a cow. Stop taking this stuff," or something like that.
Why would you say that when you're talking about a drug that's been given out to billions and billions of people, a drug that was responsible for one of the inventors of it making
Nobel Prize
in 2015?
Yeah.
A drug that has been shown to stop viral replication in vitro. You know that, right? Why would they lie and say that's horse dewormer? I can afford people medicine, motherfucker. This is ridiculous. It's just a lie.
I don't think anyone is.
But don't you think that a lie like that is dangerous on a news network when you know that they know they're lying? You know that they know that I took medicine. Like, here it is. This is ivermectin.
You got
this
it with
right
you.
Here. Somebody gave it to me.
All right, hang on. The thing is, we're like going so fast. Like I feel like I'm missing.
Do you think that's a problem that your news network lies?
Well, I don't.
Dude,
what did they say?
They lied and said I was taking horse dewormer. First of all, it was prescribed to me by a doctor.
Yeah.
Along
they
with
shouldn't have said
a
it was
bunch of other medications.
If you got a human pill, because there were people that were taking the veterinary medication, and you're not, obviously. You got it from a doctor, so that it shouldn't be called that. Ivermectin can be a very effective medication for parasitic disease. And as you say, it's probably, I think a 250 million people have taken it around the world.
More,
I get that.
Way more.
So
way more. Billions of people have taken it.
Can I just come back to the one I want to talk about? Two things on
the
ledger.
You have, before we get to that, does it bother you that the news network you work for out and out lied, just outright lied about me taking horse dewormer?
They shouldn't have said that.
Why did they do that?
I don't know.
You didn't ask? You didn't think that was you're the medical guy over there.
I didn't ask. I should have asked before coming on your podcast.
But they did it with such glee.
No,
yes,
Joe.
They did. I watched.
You watched?
I watched.
You watched? No, I don't think there's
yes,
glee.
They did.
No one takes.
Joe Rogan says he has COVID, taking livestock drug despite warnings. Yeah.
Jamie had to pull this up.
You want to play it?
Does she
this
have
is
glee?
Your news network.
I'm going to watch.
Let's see.
I'm going to watch.
He then goes on to play Erin Burnett, describing it as, I think she says, veterinary medication. He also references Brian Stelter, who had said, when you have a horse deworming medication that's discouraged by the government, that actually causes some people in this crazed environment we're in to actually want to try it, that's the upside down world we're in with figures like Joe Rogan. So
Dead to
that's
rights.
something to watch.
That was, look, you're never going to see that. You're just never going to see it.
And again, I want to give both of these men credit for engaging, and you should really listen to the whole conversation because it is actually fascinating. They go through the different studies on ivermectin. They talk about myocarditis and the incidence among young boys. I mean, they really go through it all, and it is extraordinarily important and I think good to listen to, and so little of that dialogue has happened in American discourse. But to this moment right here, you see Joe's like fighter instinct Gupta is on the ropes, and he is not. He's not going to let him out.
Yeah, he had to tap. He had to tap.
He tries to change stuff. Well, this is going so fast. Let me talk. He's like, no. Why did they say it's? Right. Why did they lie and say it's horse dewormer? And he makes this really important point. And at another point, because this went on for quite a while.
Oh, this is like 10 minutes.
And recurring came up a couple times throughout the podcast not because Joe like cares about his own like ego or whatever, but because it's really important that people feel like a news network is being straight with them. And so he draws the connection of, okay, well, if they're going to lie about this thing, which is easily checkable and like obviously untrue, what else are they lying about? Are they lying about Syria? Are they lying about Afghanistan? Are they lying about Russia? Like what other, Hunter Biden, whatever it is, how do we trust these other things that you're asserting with similar levels of confidence when something's so easily checked you're just outright wrong about?
Yeah, and Sanjay didn't have an answer. Like, I've actually met Sanjay Gupta. He's a really nice guy. I can say that. And I do actually think he's a genuinely honest actor. Remember, he's the one who asked Dr. Fauci about natural immunity.
Yep.
He's the one who did the documentary on the origins of COVID, and he got Dr. Robert Redfield, the CDC director, to tell him about the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And he's the one who is very open to the idea of a lab leak, talked about gain-of-function research. Some of the primary source materials that I have used to talk about lab leak come from Sanjay Gupta. So that is on the table. That being said, Sanjay did not have a good answer. And when Joe was like, do you understand how when people see this, how do I know you're telling the truth about Hunter Biden, Russia, Putin, or anything else? He said, do you understand that? And look, I get it. Sanjay Gupta, I mean, he's been on TV since like before I was born. And I would really say like, he is not representative of everything that's wrong at CNN. But he didn't really have a good answer.
There is no answer.
And I was
What is the answer? There is no answer.
The answer is yes, I understand that, and I think it's upsetting.
Obviously can't say that.
Right, and I was a little upset this morning because I woke up, I thought the conversation was great, and Gupta put out this kind of op-ed where he talks about, and he's like, well, some of my friends told me not to do this, and it was very much like a signaling to the elite circle of the world, like, oh, well, I had to do this because, talking to Joe Rogan, like, here's why I have to justify it. He rolled this whole op-ed. Dude, you don't have to justify anything. You're on the #1 podcast show in the country. You have a book to sell. That's easy enough justification, number one.
Yeah.
Number two is, if you can't even talk to somebody,
I know.
What's the point? The guy's a doctor. If you want to talk about somebody who is going to have the best case, like the best case for the vaccine against somebody with some honest questions about it, why do you have to write this whole sob like, here's why I did it, here's why it was important? Dude, of course it's important. You probably reached more people there than you ever did on CNN.
Yeah.
And I found that part very annoying. I understand 100% why he has to do it.
It says a lot about kind of the place that we're at, where this whole idea of like, how could you platform Joe Rogan? He doesn't. He gets way more viewers and listeners than CNN does. So you're not platforming or legitimizing anyone.
Yeah.
You have an opportunity to speak to an audience, address Joe's concerns, say, listen, this study, one, one of the studies that Joe brought up about ivermectin, for example, Sanjay was able to point out, like, well, at the same time that these people were given ivermectin, they were also given the steroid that's proven to be effective.
And I didn't know that either.
Exactly. So, that's a really useful piece of information. And they went back and forth on these specific studies where it's, okay, but here's, this was the sample size, or here's why that may have been linked to natural immunity decline in COVID in India versus ivermectin. So they actually were able to go through with factual information what each of these pieces meant and how people should think about the relative risks of the disease versus the vaccine. And it was an extraordinary 3-hour conversation.
100%.
Sanjay, there are a couple things that were noteworthy to me. They did get into it. It was not particularly contentious, but they did dig into the definition of gain-of-function research.
That's right, at the very end, actually, for those who are looking for that.
And those exchanges that Rand Paul has had with Fauci. And I think Gupta sort of rightly pointed out, like, look, obviously, Paul, he didn't say this quite so directly, but like, look, obviously this guy's got an agenda. But in the same respect, they're parsing the language and they have their very specific technical definition of gain of function that they think this doesn't technically meet. But by lots of definitions of gain of function, obviously it was. So they get into that. He talks about the cover-up of China not letting people in to look at what's going on in the lab, test the antibodies of the workers who got sick and all of those things. So that was interesting. There's also a moment at the end where they start talking about Joe's political ideology.
That's true.
And Gupta was really surprised.
Right. He was like, I thought you were a libertarian or something.
And Joe's
something
like,
to the effect.
no. I mean, Joe actually describes himself as 100% left.
Yeah.
I think some people would dispute that.
Sure.
I think he's heterodox. He has a mix of views. But he's like, I'm for universal health care.
He said he never voted for a Republican in his life.
I'm for expanding the social safety net.
And UBI.
And UBI, and talked about Andrew Yang. He also said, though, like had his critiques of the left too. But I thought that was kind of revealing as well, because Gupta, even though he had said he had listened to his podcast, had clearly taken in and internalized just the sort of caricature-ish view of Joe and what his views on all of this are. There are some parts that are extraordinarily frustrating to listen to. There are some parts that are pretty combative. There's some parts where they really come to agreement. But overall, it was definitely a worthwhile 3 hours.
You need 10 times more of this in terms of actual engagement. So I thought it was a great conversation. I encourage you guys all to go listen to it. This particular part, I'll admit, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was satisfying to watch. Very satisfying to watch.
All right.
All right, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll have more for you later. Hey, guys. Thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut. Our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions. All that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.